So as many of you may be aware with Voyant, what we're really going to be talking about is we're going to talk about what we call Advisor Go. Really what it is that Voyant itself is a platform. And it's a very interactive platform. And so what we're going to do is talk about strategy-wise from an enterprise perspective, what it is we at Voyant are doing strategy-wise for the long term with a bit of a presentation. So Advisor Go is really Voyant Advisor in a new framework. What I mean by that is a new framework from a technology perspective. What we're going to look at today has almost all of the complete capabilities of Voyant Advisor, but it's in a newer, fresher user framework in terms of it's all what we call responsive, it's interactive, it works beautifully on an iPad. Now, I'm actually having to use a desktop computer today in order to use Join.me for this presentation, but I normally spend most of my time working with Advisor Go on an iPad. Eventually, in time, not in the near future, Voyant Advisor, the desktop application, will more than likely be end-of-lifed. Now, there's no short-term plan for that, but it requires some technologies, one of which is Java, where we're having some interesting things about what Oracle itself, who controls Java, is doing. Now, that's not a short-term worry, but it is something in the long term that we're watching. What the new framework in terms of Go allows us, though, is it allows a lot more flexibility in terms of what we can do and how you can use it and things that we can play with. And what I mean by that is that it, as I said previously, the current Voyant Advisor doesn't work on an iPad. It doesn't work on an Android tablet. It doesn't work on all sorts of different devices because of technology limitations, whereas the system we're working on now, Go, does allow for those types of things. And just to give you a brief flavor for this, hopefully this works, but if I shrink my screen in, you'll notice what should happen is dynamically that everything resizes automatically for it. It's what we call responsive design. Even if I took it down more to a phone size, you'll notice that you can even get tiny charts and everything positions. The menu moves to here in terms of across instead of across the top. So this responsive design will allow it to work on a phone. So in terms of things like your intention of maybe wanting to do what I call tiny planning, sometimes in terms of some of these elements that exist, will allow it to work on a phone and different devices. Now, but it beautifully works on an iPad, it beautifully works on an Android device and all sorts of things. And you can see as I'm playing with it, it's dynamically sizing. So a lot of what we're doing here really is a corporate initiative to keep Voyant fresh, up to date, interactive, a whole new integration framework that allows us to connect to all sorts of systems, bring in other data. Lots of neat functionality that we're putting in here because we can use this modern user interface and design, which allows us to be quite flexible. And so from a strategic perspective, that's really what we're talking about. A lot of what you're going to see today, and when we originally launched Go, we launched it and we sort of said, look, let's put things out in bite-sized pieces, if you will. We've exposed the entire Voyant Advisor. Everything that's in Voyant Advisor on the server side is now available in Go, and more will be coming up in terms of new functionality. There are some new pieces we're going to talk about today, which are just not in Voyant Advisor, and we're not sure when they'll make it there because we can develop faster on this framework. Now, some of these are optional. You may not feel that they're necessary, but I'll describe them and talk to them a bit about it and give you a general feel for it. But really, this is sort of the evolution of the platform. We don't want anybody to ever think that Voyant's going to stay the same way forever. It's not. It's an evolving platform where we're constantly adding new items. We're constantly adding new pieces. As some of you may or may not know, we're market leaders in the United Kingdom. We're market leaders now in Canada. We have sizable operations here in the U.S. The beauty of it is when we do one thing for a market, when we come up with something that's an interesting piece of functionality, that piece of functionality can immediately be available to other markets, especially considering so little of that really has to do with the calculation side of things and what's unique to Ireland and each of our markets in terms of the calculations, but rather it has to do with visualizations, functionality, usability, those items that are inside the system that we can actually use and play with. So that's really what we're talking about today, sort of the strategic move of what we're looking at, the new flexibility, new items. There's quite a large development schedule that's happening that you will see going on, where new items you'll read are going to be constantly popping up over the next several months and year into Advisor Go for the new things that we want to play with. Now, let me make a point. I want to be very clear about this to everyone. If you create a plan in Advisor Go, that plan is available in Voyant Advisor. If you create a plan in Voyant Advisor, that plan is available in Advisor Go. There is no such thing as saying, and I want to be quite clear, that if I created it in one system, I can't use it in the other, and if I did it in one, it's not. No. It's the same back end. It's the exact same back-end framework and technology. It's the same underlying data object model, everything. So we have advisors, for example, who might create their plans in Voyant Advisor, but then decide to present in Advisor Go. We have people who will create simple plans in Voyant Advisor, and I want to create a quick plan sitting down with a client, and then maybe they're just more familiar with Voyant Advisor, so they'll go finish the plan in Voyant Advisor, but then come back and present it in Go. You can move between the two systems seamlessly. As a matter of fact, when I click up here, this would be my same client list that I would see in Voyant Advisor as it is in Advisor Go, and it would have all of the same elements associated with it. So anything that opens in one system is open in another. Now, later on, we'll talk, and you'll notice that there's this thing called invitations. We'll talk about how this framework is going to be able to extend to consumers, which it already does, but now consumers are going to have some new functionality, a lot of new functionality coming out later this year that's optional for advisors to invite them to. Lots of new interesting pieces of the framework around gamification in terms of game-like functionality, the ability to review their plans in a locked manner, so they might be able to see a plan just like this one, but it's locked and it's in read-only mode, but it's something they can come back to as a living thing and review as you make changes. Lots of functionality we can talk about at another time to separately talk through it. But here, what we're really going to focus on those elements are very much sort of Advisor Go for today. But again, I want to be clear, and I'm going to say it over and over again, and I apologize. You're not really making a decision about Voyant Advisor to Advisor Go. You can move between the two seamlessly, and that's really, for now, what they're designed for. Some people really love, if you're working on an iPad and you're sitting around and you want to build the plan here, great, and some different elements. So let me introduce you to, this is Advisor Go. Many of you have seen it before. We've just recently been adding a lot of new functionality to it. This that you're looking at right now, we refer to as the dashboard. And on the dashboard, you will see that it's a one-button place, and I turned everything on with this little button here, but I'm going to open everything up again, where you can see everything in one spot. So everything in the plan we can get to from one location, including our plan preferences, which are here as well. So each of the preferences are inside the system, and we can talk about the preferences and elements that are there. One of the beauties of the new UI, user interface, in terms of Go, is it has given us the ability to move seamlessly through things with more space. Voyant Advisor, the framework it's built on, had some limitations to it in terms of spacing and things of the sort. So now you will see that there are some new user conventions like yes, no buttons and things of the sort. But all of those same elements that you're used to from the preferences section of Voyant Advisor are now here available in Advisor Go for use in terms of playing with. Beyond that, you will notice that everything else in the plan is in this single dashboard location that we can get to. So we can get to the dashboard here from here and click everything. Now, how we add things to the plan is quite simple. We just click on the plus button. Now, for some of you who say, something about this design seems a bit familiar, we use an industry standard called material design. It's actually a framework developed by Google where they publish this idea for all their usability studies and all these elements. We try to base a lot of our stuff on material design, so it's quite simple to use. If you want to add something to a plan, in the plan you'll see these plus buttons, and you'll see all the elements that we can talk about adding to the plan, whether it's people, goals, events. And we're going to come back and talk about goals in just a minute, because this is something entirely new that's been exposed in Advisor Go that will be coming to Advisor eventually, but from a UI perspective, it's just cleaner here. And then you'll notice all of our other elements that you're used to inside the plan, and then some new functionality about transfers and plan withdrawals, which have been added to Voyant Advisor, but are in Advisor Go as well. You'll notice that everything gets added from that as well. Also, the description on the chart as well. One of the interesting pieces is these are in our UI or module elements. So here's our good old friend cash flow chart at the top. The cash flow chart, you can just switch between charts quickly by clicking these little elements. To the left and the right, you will see the little brackets that are there. Now, if anybody's cheating and using an iPad or any type of a touch-based screen, one of the really neat things about this design is that everything on the screen that you're looking at right now is touchable. And if I want to move between charts, between, say, the asset chart and the expense chart, you actually can just touch the chart and swipe left or swipe right. If you pinch the chart or squeeze the chart or pop it out, you will notice that, and I can't, it's not as cool here on the screen, but if I had a touch screen and I actually put my fingers on it and push them away from each other, it would actually go to a dual chart mode in terms of the elements. And then when I want to go back to a single chart, I can squeeze it in. I can't show you, since we're not in the room together, some of that really neat functionality, but I encourage you, if you have a touch-based device, whether it's a desktop, whether it's an iPad, it's really a kind of amazing, especially for client presentations, when you can just swipe through these charts, or each of these little elements on the screen you can touch in terms of that, and I can touch it, or something where I can long hold on a chart and go into the details mode if I want to go into the details mode as well. But a lot of that functionality is really neat because in the touch space it's available here in Go, which just isn't available in Advisor because of the functionality, the underlying functionality is quite neat. And there's lots of what we call Easter eggs in the system where there's hidden places that you will find, and we can describe where touch-based commands will do really neat things where you can move between. But it's all quite friendly in terms of touch-based functionality that's there, but works great with the mouse also. I'm just clicking on these little elements to go through and look at all of our different charts that we can walk through here. Here's our friend taxes. And so you will notice it there. Now, I should tell you that Let's See is still right here for looking at all the charts in the bigger mode, and that same thing I was telling you about functionality is there as well. You can swipe, pinch, and do all sorts of neat things there as well. But from the dashboard, if you're working and looking at things and playing with things and watching them change, you can hear from things as well. One of the things you will notice is here's our friend asset allocation chart, which is clickable. One of the things you will notice in the near future is the ability for some of these elements to become switchable, so that something like the asset allocation chart, if you do not use it, we're going to be turning on functionality sometime later in 2019, which will allow you to decide what you want to show there. Maybe it's something that's not an asset allocation chart, maybe it is. There'll be some other modules that you'll have the ability to turn on and off in these spots. So that being said, from a planning perspective, things really work quite similar to Voyant Advisor. It's nothing that if you're familiar with Voyant Advisor, you shouldn't look at this and go, gosh, what do you do with these things? No, it's exactly the same thing. Our friend Timeline lives right here. In Timeline, you'll see, again, we have a little bit more space. It's a bit more colorful in terms of what we've been able to do. A lot of neat. Now, another great screen where things are just clickable and draggable. To use them out, I can just click on these and I can just drag them around, and you'll see this neat functionality that highlights where it's going to. So just real pretty in terms of how we can use things in Elements. I want to show you something, and I don't know if anybody has noticed this yet, but it's quite interesting. One of the things you will not see inside Go is a save button. And the reason is that every time you change something in the plan, we're dynamically saving for you. So just because of how it's a web framework and the technology that's going on, anytime you notice that, like, well, where's the save button? We're dynamically saving it for you in terms of that. Now, you still need to create what-if plans when you want to create custom what-if plans. There's all sorts of things. But once you're working inside the system, as you're making changes, we're dynamically saving for you so that if your network goes down, the only thing you would have lost is maybe that last piece of functionality that you were working on. You wouldn't have lost an hour's worth of work or 2 hours worth of work. No. Here we're dynamically saving for you because we have that ability to do it in the functionality. So anytime I'm making a change, it's updating in the plan and saving. Make that point again. If I was to then go into Voyant Advisor, hit the sync button, make sure I have the latest version of the plan, and open this same plan in Voyant Advisor, we would get the latest working version of the plan. But here's our good friend Timeline in terms of quite visible, in terms of, you'll notice our friends up here in terms of the people that have been added to the system. They live up here. One of the things that I want to start a bit of a discussion on that is new to Go from a functional perspective, not just a UI perspective, are these concepts of goals. Goal really is if you think about it this way, a very specific named expense that we've given a unique time frame to that we want to call out and talk about in a very specific manner. And what I mean by that is that goals are discussion points, and they have parameters to them that say, now, from a true Voyant perspective, a goal really is an expense, right? It is. A goal is a money that I want to spend in the future as a goal. And there's different types of goals that we can talk about later on, but in terms of, we can talk about gifts, we can have all sorts of types of goals we can talk about. But a goal really is the idea of being able to separately track an item in the future uniquely. It's still in the cash flow plan, it's still everything that's going to happen. But if I want to talk about a specific thing, do I have enough money for, in this case, Sinead's University, and I just called it Sinead Uni. You will notice that it is how it's put in as the idea of a basic goal. It's got the same timings, it's got details, it's got timings, and you can even step it as a goal. It looks just like an expense and it acts like an expense, but it allows us to have this discussion about it, about particular goals that may draw important. Now, everything doesn't need to be in as a goal. Right. I tell people that making your normal expenses, now you can put, for example, now I didn't in this plan, you can put in something, for example, like a retirement income goal. So my goal during retirement is to be able to spend 75,000 euro a year, right? That can be put in as a goal, or it can be put in as an expense. It's quite flexible for you to decide how it is that you want to talk about each of these individual items. What goals allow us to do or call out places where we uniquely want to track what's important to the client that we also might think is important, so that we can talk about them uniquely, not just inside the cash flow chart, but we can call them out in these manners as goals. So here, I've actually put in a holidays goal that says how many years, I want to spend 10,000 euro a year. And on the timing of the goal, it's from the start all the way till the end in terms of the goal. So I've got until mortality, and I can put it in that way. Now, the neat functionality we're going to talk about in timeline and usability. But let's say that I wanted to shorten this goal to here. A neat piece of functionality, that drag and drop thing I was talking about. If I wanted to say, that's a little too long, I want to change this goal to be where it's change of pace. When he's 80, they're going to travel less. I can just click on it and drag it up, and you'll notice that it grays out the areas that aren't part of it. So I could change that in terms of the goal that's there. So the goals look, and people say, well, they look a lot like expenses, but this allows us to track them uniquely. In the coming development cycles, it's also going to allow us to play a bit with goals, that goals can have priorities. So certain goals can be of higher and lower priorities, and you'll be able to do the calculations eventually that says, calculate this plan, but eliminate all of my, what we call moonshot goals, the goals that are just something I'm throwing in there for fun, but don't expect to ever to be able to do it. You'll have this way of playing with goals and individually tracking and playing with this concept of goals. And again, what may be a goal to one person may not be a goal to another person. So for some people, we like to explain that, for some people, buying a new automobile may be a goal. They may have a goal of buying a car, a very specific car. For other people, they may just throw cars as a monthly expense in the system and say, nah, I spend, 600 euro a month on transportation. Throw it in there. I don't think of cars. I don't have a strategic goal of buying a car. So really what you come up with in terms of goals are very unique to the client, but it allows us to draw them out. Now, you may have noticed what just happened on the screen, and it changed a bit, but when I saved that goal change, you'll notice that when I switched it down to 80 for that change of pace, one of the things you'll notice is that it recalculated that this goal has been met for 20 of 27 years. So it's telling us for these individual items how important they are, and then how they can affect, and we can talk and play with them, we can track them uniquely and look at that. So it helps a bit in terms of that description of the shortfall. You will notice that our friend goals is also here on this dashboard. So we bring goals to here as well, and so we can talk about if someone really wants to just talk about, yes, here's your overall cash flow, but look, for the 5 goals that are most important to you in the next 10 years, you're in good shape, but they might be affecting other things later on. So really this concept of goals is that it's really a matter of something that's quite new in here, quite popular in terms of the folks that are using it. It allows us to call out these certain items and talk about them in this unique manner while other things can be added in. So we have all sorts of other expenses in this plan, including some other education expenses, and then a normal living still are inside the system. Our friends, like here's Uni for Sinead in the system, here's other elements, and you noticed when we were on the timeline, when I clicked on those goals, it highlighted as well. Now, these do as well, so our events pop up, and our events are still here in terms of individual events that pop up when I mouse over them. But really, that's a key element that's coming in, is in this functionality to talk about goals and how we plan for goals. Now, goals are not locked off, meaning, if you put in a goal for something for 25,000 euro, we're not locking off that goal. It's still an expense inside the system and how it's using, but it's got these special parameters to it that allow us to track it separately and see what's happening inside the system as well. Well, let's talk about Let's See for a minute and some of the functionality inside of Let's See. Now, with Let's See, you'll notice there's our friend here has the ability to hide all and turn on all types of things. One of the things we have the ability up here to do as well is we can click here to change our charts. So this functionality, if you're using a mouse, still exists, but as I mentioned before, I much prefer to swipe between or click between the charts and talk through them in terms of type elements here. Hide all, of course. Each of these little blurbs right here, you can just touch and turn off. And so if I want to talk about a specific item, I can talk about a specific item inside there. You will notice if I double click on a given year, I can go into the details about that given year. Now, I'm still going to come back to details in just a second, but each year inside the system, we can talk about in terms of looking at the details of each year if I long touch on it in terms of a long hold, or I double click on it using a mouse. So again, a lot of unique functionality here that allows us to play with. Other elements that have been added in, we've got our friend here, which of course is detailed, and this turns on our detailed elements that are here. And as I mentioned, each one of these items we can look at and play with and talk through. So if I want to look at, for example, a specific amount, I could turn on shortfalls. A specific amount in the system, I could. If I wanted to go to something, say assets, and look at a detailed assets chart, I can then click off individual elements and then just look at the values of things over time on a particular asset, how it's going to be drawn upon or not drawn upon in this case. This is a piece of property that's just going inside the system. So all that functionality allows us to play and look inside the system and play with different aspects, all very touchable and playable and things of the sort. One new element that we've seen inside the system that's recently been added to Go that you're familiar with in Voyant Advisor, but really here it's allowed us to come up with a whole bunch of additional stuff that it's allowed us to do, is this element in terms of really deep into the individual year chart details. So this is a new piece of functionality that is very powerful for your work, but what we can do is pick any given year in the system, and here I can look at cash flow. Most people are like, oh yeah, we use, this is what we use all the time, detailed charts inside of Voyant Advisor. Here we can look at cash flow, we can switch over and look at expenses, and again, we have a lot more room and a lot more visualization in terms of what we can look and play with in terms of these details. We can look at investments inside the system. We can click on each of the investments inside the system. And as we look at this, we can look at tremendous amounts of detail, even detail not available in Voyant Advisor for this individual account. So in this case, not only do I have the net growth, but I can see the yields, the fee rates, the net growth inside the system. I can see anything. Here's the withdrawals, actually 127. Same goes with something like Intel shares. I can look at any of these items in the system. I probably should go out here where there's a bit more happening in terms of entering and look at what's going on in terms of withdrawals. All of that detail is available on a per annum basis that we can look and play with. And the two things, I can either just touch the window here and move between years, or I can drag the slider bar, whichever one we want to play with in terms of elements. And that goes through in terms of the details of every item in the system. So I can start here and look at something like this, the occupational pension payout, and then move through other elements. That's just an annuity, so not much there in terms of details. Here's the Beach Park property in terms of that. But wherever there's details in the system, no debts at this point, we can look and play with. So something like taxes, for example, we can get, and I can do an expand all, which will create quite a bit of, make it quite long. We can get quite detailed here into the taxes in the system and what's happening on a per annum basis. And let's remember, this is just for right now projected 2039, kind of a random year. This is just 1 year's projected data that we can look at and look at individual thresholds. We can look at the gross taxable income. We can look at any in terms of tax credits, capital gains, all the elements we can talk about, we can look at on a per annum basis and click through and look at these elements. And we can look at them on who's or what. We can close these down as well. So I can actually collapse all. So here I can look at the elements in terms of taxes. And if I just want to look at income tax and credit, I can look at income tax and credit, or income tax credits. I can look at total taxable income. All these elements we can dig into. So really that's one of the new elements that's been added into the system, is the ability to go in and look at these ultra detailed pieces on a per annum basis to really look and compare and play with different elements inside the system. So as we're playing with the system and we're all used to it, we see that we might want to make a change. We may want to create a what-if plan. One of the things in Go that's quite interesting is our ability to create what we call guided what-ifs. So in this case, what we've really done is that if in some cases they're simple, in some cases they're trickier in terms of what we've done, is we have the ability to put in flows to the system where we can walk you through elements. And this is a place where you're going to see a lot of growth in terms of Voyant, where we're going to see new things that are going to come into the system, where we're going to add new guided what-ifs. And we have all sorts of users that send us recommendations. Now, some of these are quite interesting. You'll get the sense about how at some point, maybe for certain types of plans, maybe we'll let some consumers into play and things of the sort themselves. But here, if I want to do something like retire earlier or later in this plan, and maybe in this plan I want to retire a bit later because I've got some shortfalls, what I can do is just come in, click on this and say, okay, John, let's retire at 67. That's probably a better retirement age. Mary, we're going to take you out to 68. What if we do that, and how does the plan look if we retire? You'll see that it went ahead and created that. So yeah, that's one idea that we're willing to go with. Let's keep it. I'm just going to click these little arrows to go through. And you can say, like, would you like to keep this plan? So here's where we were before on the bottom. Here's our friend, the base plan, and you can see that we've added somewhere around 10 years. Because they retired 2 years later each, we have additional growth. We have all sorts of things, reduced expenses. You can see that we're much further out in terms of covering up some of our shortfall. If I want to say yes, I want to keep that plan, you can see it dynamically named it for us, the retire earlier or later plan. There's not much else I need to do here. I can actually just, look at the plan in terms of available plans. We've switched to that plan, and now we can just say we're at the Let's See chart, and we're using this plan. So it created us a guided what-if, where now we've gone through. So now when I look at my plans, you can see I've got my retire earlier or later plan, and then there's the base plan where we started. And I can do our friend compare plans here in terms of comparing plans in these cases. You can still go through the other way and not a guided what-if. Just give the plan a name in terms of a new what-if plan name. You can pick which plan it is you want to copy and then create a new plan from it and then change anything in the plan, and we're still going to track all those changes, just like in Voyant Advisor, but this new functionality of a guided what-if where we can just sit with a client and say, what if we do this? So we can change life expectancy. We can talk about right-sizing a home. So right-sizing a home is the plan is, I'm going to sell one house and buy another house. So in that model, what we can do is we walk you through a flow that connects all those together, selling one piece of property, buying another piece of property. The additional cash comes out, or maybe more has to come in because you can go to a bigger house or a smaller house, but we've automated that flow in terms of things to think about so that you don't have to go to 5 or 6 spots inside the application to do it. We can just automate you through that flow. And so in terms of what-if plans, same thing here. I could just say I want to create another plan here in terms of create this plan, give it a name, pick a plan to copy, give it a name, we can go from there. Another element inside the system, which has a bit of a different name, Voyant Advisor, we call these simulations. Here we call them insights. And really they're one-button things that we can look at and play with that give us a sense for what's happening. We've tried to work to simplify these for both advisors and explaining to clients so that it's really more of a 1 or 2 button thing to pick from. So in this case, if I was going to do investment rate of returns, I can look at retired rate of return, and from the start event to the end event, what rate of return do I need to get the red out of the plan? In this case, it's 6.67%. So here, you're going to play and test with the plan that says, yeah, we probably should retire a little later. Now that we've done it, we can run these simple insights that we've tried to make a bit more simple. Now, one of the things that this has allowed us to do is, again, with the additional room, framework, everything we can do, we have the ability to create some new what-ifs or some new insights in the system that can be used. So retirement spending is a good example. I can say include taxes and say, how much, if I don't change anything else in my plan, what kind of level income can I get during retirement until mortality? So if my goal was 75,000 of a level income, that's one thing. But how much right now, based on if I don't do anything else, what kind of level income can I get? And in this case, we've calculated your spending capacity. This is in a present value, is 52,832 euro, and so there we're saying here's how much we can actually use and play with in terms of living. Now, you'll notice that's a pretty substantial drop down from where we're at right now in terms of how we're living and spending. Now, that's including taxes. If I exclude taxes, I can run the same calculation again, and we can see what happens in terms of excluding taxes on that side. So excluding taxes, I can do 51,172 is what I can spend. So really, it seems like I'm in a pretty good position from an advantageous tax perspective. So some of the new insights, and these are new things that you'll see showing up inside the system. There'll be some new elements that you're going to see showing up in as well, which allows us to do all sorts of things and play with and talk through. So most of your favorite Voyant Advisor simulations are now here as insights, with then the ability to talk about some of the other pieces that we've just tried to make it simple. This is, again, another place that over the coming year, you're going to see a lot of expansion in terms of these one-button insights. Now, I should make the point one more time. Same infrastructure, same data model, same calculation engine. We are not doing calculations different here than we do with Voyant Advisor. It's literally the exact same calculation engine. All we're doing here is, in some cases, limiting the number of places where you can play with data elements to try to make it a simpler user experience, because feedback we've gotten from a lot of advisors has been, I never use that. I just go with, if I'm going to do a life insurance needs analysis, I don't say that they're going to die in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. I'm going to say, well, what happens if something happens in the near term? And we're going to calculate from that. I'm not looking to sell a life policy in 5 years. We're talking about checking your life policy right now to make sure you're in good shape. And in this case, they're in okay shape. So here, you'll remember in Advisor, there's lots of places where you can say start policy in 5 years. Here, we've just made it one-button versions where we can click and switch charts to make the experience simpler based on all the feedback that we've gotten over the years. The next section I'll talk a bit about is reports. So there is actually very interesting here in terms of what we've done, and I'm going to try to get this one to show. But the new framework allows us more control, if you will, or more flexibility in terms of what reports we can actually create. We can create all sorts of new and interesting custom reports, and you're going to see another place here we're going to be introducing a lot more reports inside the system. What it also allows us to do, in a lot of cases, to do a lot of automation pieces inside the system. So here what we have is, again, we do all sorts of pretty paper reports. One of the neat things, and this is the new financial summary report, is that there's a whole lot of things that we're able to do in the new reporting function where we actually can orchestrate a lot of things at once. And so you'll notice on this report, and I mentioned when we were talking about this earlier, that one, we brought out things like your top 3 goals. So these are your nearest 3-term goals. You got a little mini cash flow chart here. It's quite pretty. You've got our asset allocation chart, some of our assumptions. You've got a bit of net worth, a bit of a financial summary that is there. You've got your annual savings. So one of the things that we've done in this report, we've included the goals, and 2, we're actually able to run a bunch of insight dynamically in the background and then add them into this report. But there's a lot of new functionality that we can actually put into the system and play with in terms of functionality. And again, reports is another place where you're going to get to see a lot, and I mean a lot of additional functionality is going to be coming in around what you're seeing here. So we have the ability to come in and say on a single page, give you sort of a concise picture of where you're at today in terms of a financial summary. You'll also be able to create insight reports. So when we were back here, and again, let me switch back in a second. So one of the things in the application that you'll have the ability to do is on these insights, you'll have the ability to create unique insight reports. So that when you're on this system, if you want to show somebody, hey, I ran this retirement summary report for you, or in this case, our friend retirement spending. If you want to give that to somebody as a separate report, you'll actually have the ability soon to create insight reports on a single insight and add them to other reports. There's a lot of new additional report functionality that's in already, and you can add these items to a report. So I can add the fact find or the retirement summary, and I can add them to report. Quite robust now in terms of up there, but again, with all the new flexibility we have in the new framework, it's going to allow us to do even more. That being said, back to our friend the dashboard in terms of walk through most things in the system. Here's where you have the ability to control plans and compare plan details, and of course, I can add notes inside the system in terms of create copies, all the places we can play. Here we can invite clients. So here, for those that have, and I think we still give everybody a couple of licenses, if they want to invite a client, this is what the client will actually see is the Go framework. For now, there's new stuff that will be coming out soon. So we've pretty much walked through functionally what we're doing here. I think I've covered most things. No, I didn't go into detail like a training session or things this way. I just want to give a sort of a generic overview of where we're at. By the way, you can even see in our retirement later plan that now that our goal out here was change of pace, and you'll see where we are now on our holidays because of it, for we were at 63% earlier in terms of the goal, but now that we've actually retired later, we can meet 100% of our holiday goals.